Welcome to the D&D Fitness Radio podcast, brought to you by your hosts, Don Saladino from New York City and Derek Hansen from Vancouver, Canada.
Crazy times. We were, Derek and I were just talking about it. We have, in addition to all that, Don, we have the massive fires out here where we are in Seattle and in Vancouver.
So sorry to hear that. I know.
It's just heavy. It's just like,
and the air quality here is just absolutely terrible. Derek, have you been getting some backlash from that? Have you been seeing a little bit of that on the West Coast?
We have the worst air quality in the world, man.
Yeah. In Seattle, Don, everybody thinks it's concentrated in California, but and Derek's, I'm about 2-3 hours from where you are, right?
Yep, south of us, yeah.
And it's the Eastern Washington fires are wicked, have been wicked. Today, fortunately, and yesterday, a little bit of precipitation started, so they're calming a little. But up here in the Pacific Northwest, we're getting hit pretty hard, just like Cali and Oregon.
It's unbelievable. Yeah, I mean, it's just it's definitely an interesting year. I mean, when you look at it, fires, riots, COVID. I mean, when it starts adding up, you say to yourself, "Wow, this is interesting." I mean, a couple months ago with New York City literally going through that, you're like, "What else can happen?" And then the wildfires kick up, and you're like, "Holy shit! There you go. I won't open my mouth again."
I know they're trying to take away outdoor fitness from us, Don. What are we going to do?
Yeah.
I'm in the business of monitoring folks moving. Now I have to move in my apartment.
it's just crazy. I mean, I've had, because I run these challenges and I'm having people, part of my challenges. Yeah. There's running involved in that, and some of the people a part of it are just like, I can't run outside. Like, I gotta do stuff
be in the mountains, stare on the track, playing soccer. Like, I saw you had a great post the other day that reminded me of what I love about training so much. We can get into this, but you said, always remember to play. You're on the football field and you're getting in a little training, but you're also just having fun.
Yeah.
Playing.
Yeah, I totally
up,
agree with that.
The training effect builds, and you're not as regimented with the sets and reps as as in some workouts.
Gets a little rigid. It really, I mean, I enjoy it, and I love programs. Like I love going in and knowing what I have to do, and I know, you deviate from that, but I enjoy. That's what I love about, and I want to get into this a little bit, and how, Derek, just kind of connecting the dots here. Derek's been a very good friend of mine for years, and obviously we run this podcast together. But I met Derek because he's a running mechanics coach that came into New York, and he had a big name client, and we just hit it off. And he trained out of my club for a while, and someone that I just learned a lot from. Is a much different. It's just a much different element that what I coach. I do not consider myself a running mechanics coach or a running coach. I love to run.
Yeah.
But we were talking about you the other day, and the reason why we really wanted to bring you on was I think you've educated me so much on heart rate. And I still I feel like I know this much in an industry that you have to learn this much about. Yeah. And it's interesting. And it's the Firstbeat. I mean, so you've been working with Firstbeat for how many years?
Since 2006, really.
So what's your title there, if you don't mind me asking?
Well, I'm independent. So my company is Pivot Sports, thus, promoting my brand here a little. Pivot Sports, I founded in 2011 so that I could become a distributor for Firstbeat North America. Mm-hmm. So essentially in 2011, Don and Derek, I had all of the United States and all of Canada was my territory for all sports and all military. Now, we've grown a lot. At that time, there were 15 people at Firstbeat, and now there are 150. And a month ago, we just sold the analytics division from Firstbeat to Garmin. So they took half the company. Yeah, it was a big deal. I mean, because for a very small company, it was a hugely successful transition.
So just giving everyone who's watching this a little, like, what does Firstbeat look like? It's basically a heart rate monitor that I wear anytime I do cardio. I mean, I wear this, and I think what I love about it so much is that after the workout, it breaks down a score to you. I can set, I do a lot of indoor training on my True Form, and I'll have my phone set up with the Firstbeat up there. So when I go in and I have my kind of homework assignments of ranges I have to stay into, I'm trying to hit those ranges for, it could be as low as 20 seconds to as much as, 20 minutes, depending on the straight, or 30, 40 minutes, whatever that might be. So, but what happens at the end is the Firstbeat, this device kind of takes all the information, shuttles it over to my phone, and it spits out a report. It's a 1-page report. And what's really interesting about the report is it breaks things down in different categories, but it's, breaks it down mainly like aerobic and anaerobic. So it shows me like where has been my endurance work and then where's been my work technically without oxygen, right? That's what anaerobic is, right? It's without or with less oxygen. So that's been fun because I can now turn around and see how hard I worked in accordance to my max heart rate. And it's giving me different scores. So I'll wear it on the ice when I play ice hockey. I had a game on Tuesday and I wore it out there, and then I got off, I pulled it off and I hit save, and I looked down, I was like, oh wow, I scored a 3.4. That's pretty good, for me. So that's what I've been loving about it. I love that quantifiable information.
Yeah, that's great. Now tell me, I just want to dig in there a little bit for some of your listeners. When you see a 3.4, now you've been going with Firstbeat, and we've talked a lot in the early weeks, Don. When you see a 3.4 training effect, tell me what you glean from that number after 6 months. I like to see,
it's less about, the total training effect is interesting, but it's more interesting to see how it was broken down from anaerobic to aerobic. So how much I'm always scoring higher on aerobic. I can never get that anaerobic. I can never get the anaerobic number higher. And that's something I'd like to talk about here as well.
Yeah.
And maybe it's, when I start seeing my anaerobic number get higher, my anaerobic number get higher, that's because my intervals were a little shorter and a little harder, and I was taking more rest. And, it's interesting because now you can start focusing on training different energy systems, which I think is something that I really want to dive into today a bit, because some basic questions, and I know Derek's going to have a million of them, are, what is the best way to train? We always hear this for general pop. So that's going to be, I think, a fun topic to talk about. I think yes, there we go.
Something like this, we're talking about the anaerobic and the aerobic training effect, which we show here in a dial. Derek, I'm not sure if you've seen this yet, and of course that's the heart rate tracing above, broken out in color codes for percentage of max heart rate. When I go to green, I'm at 85% of max heart rate. Why do I set the green number at 85%? Because 85% represents my anaerobic threshold. So, actually, sorry, I totally misspoke there. The yellow is when I go to 85% of max heart rate. So that's my anaerobic. The yellow is my anaerobic training zone. The green would be my aerobic power. The blue would be my base aerobic conditioning, or below aerobic threshold. So you've got aerobic threshold in there for the blue. You've got aerobic power in there for the green. And you've got anaerobic for the yellow at 85% of max heart rate. Remember, all the percentages are customizable. We talked about this, Don, in the early going for you. And then I touched red here a little on some speed sets with kettlebell the other day, 1 minute, really working hard. And that's like for you, Don, it's like, that's rewarding to me to see that, okay, I put in a little peak work. Maybe it was just a minute, maybe it was 2 minutes that day, but that ultra high intensity, and I get to quantify that with how much time in red. Red for me, incidentally, is 90% of heart rate max.
Yeah. But again, I like seeing the red once in a while. I like being in there once in a while. It's a good feeling to know that you hit that.
Yeah. And then the 3.2 or 3.3 aerobic training effect, on to highlight what you said. When we're doing work like we do a lot of times, there isn't a lot of rest. So ultimately the aerobic energy system is turned on, is activated a lot, even though we have high intensity efforts in there. But really, what's interesting about hockey is that's one of the sports where I do see the highest anaerobic training effects without oxygen, because of the high intensity and the rest. But when we looked at your stuff, this is so interesting too, when you think about like levels of teams and the way you play sport. Remember what we discerned about your hockey intervals when we looked at them? You were out in the ice for like 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes. It was too long.
Because it is too long. It's not. I mean, you look at the NHL, it's probably what, Derek?
45 seconds,
right?
Yeah, at most.
Yeah, 40 seconds. Exactly.
Hockey's
unless you get stuck out there.
Out there a little longer.
Yeah.
Yeah. So your aerobic energy system has to kick in to allow you to continue on it. That's why. Now we do know though, you were getting some 3.0. You were getting a pretty decent anaerobic training effect on some of your hockey workouts, but still the aerobic was dominant.
Derek, do you have any questions? Because I feel like I'm going for an hour. I don't want to hog it here. Why don't you jump in?
Yeah, jump in. Give me some thoughts.
Yeah, no, I had some experience with like the team systems before. Like Sunto had a team system that I used years ago. And then
Great.
I started work with the Toronto Maple Leafs, and they were using a polar system. But what's the best way to use that? Like, I know a lot of teams are talking about load management and like, you know, we don't want to work too hard in practice during the regular season. And what are some of the applications you've seen for teams to use this the best way?
Yeah, well, first of all, nice of you to bring up Sunto. In 2006, when Don asked me how long I've been with Firstbeat, I started in 2006. I was a trainer at Sports Club LA, and a friend of mine walked up to me and said, "Hey," she was working for Sunto at the time, doing watches, you know, doing the outdoor watches. And she said, "We have a new product. Would you be interested?" She said, "I know you've been in track and field for a long time, and you know some people in pro sports." Anyway, they had this Sunto team system, Derek. So I said, "Sure, I'll give it a shot." And I remember at the time I was thrilled because they were giving me, 8% of the sale. And the sale at that time for the Sunto team system was like $2,500. I kid you not. 3 months later, I had Los Angeles Lakers using Sunto team system, and they brought me in to train them. So I did a week in training camp with Kobe, with Phil, with Derek Fisher, all the guys. And then a month later, I was with San Antonio Spurs. Greg Popovich had me in. So I was learning all this information, making a few cents here and a few cents there, thinking I was doing this great work. And what I was really doing was learning what it was to, to see different kinds of heart rate responses, to see and learn about training effect, to learn about EPOC, excess post-exercise oxygen consumption. The EPOC value, by the way, is what drives our aerobic training effect number. So the more intensity and duration, the higher the EPOC, which is an absolute volume of oxygen inspired, the higher the training effect score. It's a very dynamic number though, because if you rest, EPOC goes down and training effect sits where it was until you build that EPOC back up to push it higher. And very, very important, I want to get this in now because I know we might forget, but so many people, Don, you and I have these interesting philosophical discussions around heart rate. There's a lot of art in extrapolating, and I'll get to your question, Derek, for sure, about load management in teams. But if athletes aren't fit, or our everyday, our clients that we train and we see, or our friends that we work out with on runs or cycling, it's harder to get a training effect. And a lot of people confuse that because they think, well, I'm not fit. Wouldn't I do, a 20-minute session with Don and get a really big training effect? Not necessarily. It's more often what happens is the fitter you are, the stronger you are, the harder you can go. You can touch that red, spend time in that yellow. You can play in those higher intensities and drive your EPOC up or drive your anaerobic, your repeat sprint ability up. So that's just, that's a huge misconception with heart rate. Now, I will say this, caveat. If you have a previously athletic person who has experience with endurance sports or experience with any, team sport, and they're deconditioned, but they're mentally tough and they want to get after it, okay, then you have those instances where you have somebody who's not fit that can get a big training effect because they're willing to really push through that feeling that the body telling them, hey, take it easy, this doesn't feel good. It's fatigue. But remember, when we create disturbance and when we build EPOC and when we build at least a 3.0 training effect, what we've done on the aerobic side is we've increased our ability to resist fatigue. So when you can resist fatigue better, and I know this is so empowering, and I think people need to understand that resist fatigue, that's a reward that allows you to do more good work.
More horsepower, right? I mean, you're basically just,
you're more efficient horsepower.
You're more efficient, but you're not, it's like the way please correct me if I'm wrong, because the purpose of this day obviously is to educate our followers, but Derek and I want to learn also. I mean, there's so much that we can learn from you on this, but it almost reminds me of this. If you had to take a car that wasn't a high performance vehicle and run it in a race, or if you were in a boat and you were racing across the harbor and you had to gun that boat, that motor at max speed is really it's gonna work really hard with the potential of overheating, with the potential of burning out, with the potential of something going wrong. But if you get in a boat with 1,000 horsepower, which I've seen easily around here, and you're running it at half speed, which would be the same speed as that other boat going all out, it can run for hours nonstop with that. That's the best example that I like to give.
Yeah, that's the concept we use is called speed reserve. So if you can run faster, then when you play your sport, like here's an example, like Tyreek Hill can run, I think 27 miles per hour In the game, he runs 21.5, but he can do it a lot.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So it's a sub max, right? So that's a speed reserve concept.
That's awesome. I love that.
Two quick points about those examples, and then I'll get back to team and load management, Derek, your first question. I had this great conversation with Landon Donovan. This is probably a decade ago. You know, one of the most successful U.S. soccer players in history. And he told me we were monitoring the guys, and my job was to tell the head coach, Bob Bradley at the time, if he was successful at delivering a really hard session, because he was notorious for fitness. He wanted to make sure that all his guys were getting enough work in. Okay. So I had to evaluate and deliver answer that question. Are the guys getting a really hard workout, a really big training effect? And Landon told me he had the monitor on, we were doing some work, and most guys were, but there was definitely a distribution. Some guys were at 3.1, 3.2, and some guys were at 4.7, 4.8, right? But Landon said, John, I've trained with heart rate a lot. I've worn the monitor. I know my levels and I love it. He says, the hardest work I do, this is to your point, Don, about racing a boat across the lake and being at 50% of your capacity. He said, the hardest work I do is usually in my warm-up. He goes, my sprints, in the warm-up are the highest intensity in terms of heart rate values that I see for the whole game. So isn't that fascinating? I was like, really? So the game wasn't taxing him on those individual sprints or efforts. It maybe cumulatively it would, but his hardest work was getting ready.
His quality is going to be maintained at such a high level. He's going to be towards the end of that game without as much fatigue as, say, another player. And he's not going to be making the mistakes that maybe another player, which is a testament to why, obviously, he was in he made the semis of a World Cup, or how far did he make
the most goals ever by
he's
the
an
best
exceptional
player. That's the U.S. born player ever.
Yeah, unbelievable.
No question.
The funny thing is that I think a lot of people think sports itself is like this really high paced, but it's kind of controlled. Like there was a team I was working with, and they were doing GPS and heart rate, and they found that the highest speeds and heart rates they had was the tight end running on and off the field to get into position for special plays, right? And things like that. So it wasn't the actual game. It was running from the sidelines to get in the play. So it's very...
It's funny because UCLA football just told me the same thing in essence. They said, a lot of our high-speed data we have to kind of correct for because it happens after the play, like a wide receiver, goes on a pattern and continues another 10 meters after the play is over, or this extraneous workload that isn't part of the actual play or the game. But anyway, let's circle back and I'll try to answer your question about team. So essentially, what we try to do is we try to give indicators or metrics or data points that will be meaningful for you as a coach to understand your players. And one of them that's really prominent or really important now in the world of team sports is this acute to chronic work ratio. So we all kind of know what that means, but actually using it in practice, again, I go back to sort of the art of evaluating load through internal metrics like heart rate and training effect is how do we build tolerance for work? So basically my orange line in this dashboard is my acute training load. So we want to see this acute training load build as we start getting fit and stronger and have games and efforts, but we don't want to see it build too quickly so that this acute to chronic work ratio gets out of whack. So see, on that day, my acute to chronic work ratio is 1.0, which is spot on where it should be if this week is representative of the kind of acute load we want to see. Does that make sense? So how do we build the acute training load, which in our data is represented by TRIMP sum. So TRIMP is training impulse, and it just starts at 0 and goes up with work.
That's just showing your workload throughout the week, right? I mean, isn't that is it the week or is it the day? Isn't it accumulation of overall work?
So it's everything. So Don, you do a session today, you'll get a TRIMP score. You do a good hard hour, or I'll give you the hockey numbers. A good session for hockey, 1 hour, is about 100 TRIMP. But this orange line is this 7-day TRIMP sum. So you'd love to start working with this, Don, because what we can do then is I can tell you, well, Brent Burns, San Jose Sharks defenseman, has 1,300 TRIMP per week. And we can start a lot. Yeah, because then we can start looking at our week, and I can say, well, right now, my TRIMP, my weekly load right here, acute training load, 374.
But the only deceiving part on that is like I do a lot of resistance training,
Yeah.
right? So, and I love all this cardiovascular, call it what you want, energy systems work. I'm as passionate about this as anything else. I just do more strength training work, but I don't measure my trimp on strength training work. So that's still fatigue, isn't it? I'm going in, I'm deadlifting, I'm squatting, I'm putting in an hour a day, 5 days a week of my workout sessions, mobility, all this stuff. But I'm not really accumulating that in my trim because I'm not really wearing the monitor while I'm doing that work. Or is that wrong? Should I be doing that and still trying to accumulate that number as I work out?
I think you should be doing it for some. Now, if you said to me, Johnny, I collected 4 or 5 strength training sessions and the highest trimp was 20 or 15, and I'd say, all right, forget about it. But you might see that in some of those sessions you get 50 or 60, and that's going to contribute significantly to your acute training load.
Right.
And just to finalize on that acute to chronic work ratio, what we're really looking for, what the home run ratio is, guys, is that weekly trimp sum compared to your monthly average week. That's the big home run, because Don, if it's one thing to know your daily trimp, it's another to know your weekly trimp sum, which is acute training load. But now compare your acute training load to your average week in the month, and that's how we get the 1.0. This 1.0 will vary. See, if I click a different day, that 1.0 becomes 0.7. So that means my week at that point, my trailing 7 days, was less than my average monthly or average weekly trimp for the last month, because the 0.7 is less than 1. So that means, well, why am I in a lower week? Do I want to be in a lower week relative to my month average, or do I want to bump that back up to continue to build my tolerance and stay at that level that I've achieved?
Right. Can we back up for 1 second?
Yeah.
On one thing. Now I think the most confusing thing for, I think, a trainee out there, and I'm not talking about a high level trainee, I'm talking about the mass public, the individual who, has their Apple Watch or puts on a Polar monitor or puts on a Firstbeat monitor, and they're measuring heart rate, but they don't actually know what they're measuring for. Mm-hmm. Right? So you hear this 9 out of 10 times with general pop. My heart rate got up to 163. And you're like, all right, well, what does that mean?
Great.
Right?
What does even max heart rate mean? Like, I know it's 220 minus your age is what we all heard, right, Don?
Well, that's something I definitely want to get into. So what I'd love is to maybe categorize this right now and get into max heart rate. But first, could we discuss the different ranges and the different objectives, what people should be thinking about? I mean, heart rate 101 here.
Yeah.
Like, talk to us right now as if
great point.
We don't know what are we measuring? Why are we measuring it? Let's not even get into the trimp. Let's not even get into that yet. What is someone going to look at if they want to burn fat, if they want to increase aerobic capacity, if they're a sprinter? But if they're sprinters, why do sprinters' bodies look a lot different than distance runners? Where are you burning fat differently? Can you just kind of give us a one-on-one breakdown of that and then get into our heart rate question, or max heart rate question?
Yeah, sure. And we had some great conversations, Don. If you and I could go back 6 months ago and capture what you
need hours for this. We're going to have to do this more than once.
Again,
it's cool with you.
The best, definitely. The best thing I ever heard, one of the best guys I've ever trained with around heart rate, and we're going to touch all those points about burning fat and sprinters' bodies and where you develop strength based on heart rate. One of the best quotes I ever heard around heart rate training was from Johnny G. He developed the indoor spin bike. So he's impacted all of our lives in terms of like how much we're interested in training and fitness, and who hasn't put in a solid workout on an indoor bicycle. You know what I mean? 25 years ago, nobody thought about riding bicycles indoors until Johnny G came from South Africa and said, I think I want to ride bicycles indoors and teach people how to do it. And he developed these rolling hills and standing climb and seated climb and all these ways of training on an indoor bike. But he said to me, he goes, John, it's very hard to train a big group of people with using heart rate. You need to have a great feeling, a tactile and a nuanced feeling for what you're looking at. If all we have is heart rate, Don and Derek, if we have training effect and trim and HRV and recovery, things become a lot snappier and a lot quicker. But let's boil it down a little bit. Everybody's ranges are different. Here are a couple beautiful absolutes though, because there's always some way to extract absolutes, I believe, even in the nuanced system of looking at fields of data and data mining. One of them is as you get fitter, your resting heart rate goes down. So a lower resting heart rate is a very beautiful sign of aerobic fitness. So as we put in more endurance work, more linked work, our resting heart rate goes down. What's a good resting heart rate for these athletes that we talk about? And then for general population, for Landon Donovan types and Tom George, the rower I just did a webinar with in Great Britain, you know, we're talking about 40 beats per minute. But we're also, for your people out there too, we don't want them to go, oh my gosh, I'm at 60 or I'm at 70 or I'm at 8. That's fine. Like right now, when we're talking, guys, we're alert, we're engaged. It's not true resting. So when I talk about resting at 40 beats or 38 beats or whatever, 42 beats per minute, that's true rest in the morning in bed before you do anything. Very well relaxed, very hydrated, in a very, very good place.
And you don't refer to that as when you're sleeping, because you're like, I'll wake up and I'll know what my heart rate was at low.
Essentially, great. Essentially, it's as if we were still sleeping, though.
Okay.
Just with eyes open and a little bit of awareness, but certainly not, you know, looking at the stock market or having a conversation with our 6 a.m. client or whatever. Okay, so then the next thing, and you know, I'll give a shout out to Sally Edwards, who has written more books on heart rate training than ever. She's a triathlete and a physical educator. She said one of the best things you can do when you start to train with heart rate is wear the heart rate monitor 24 hours a day. So you can see, what am I when I go up the stairs? What am I when I sit down? What am I when I'm cooking dinner? What am I when I do kettlebells? What am I when I run? Then you start to get, and this is what you and I did 6 months ago, Dom, you start to get a feeling for, is that 172 number I saw during my first week of training with heart rate, is that getting close to my max? Am I still quite a ways away? Do I need to do some other types of sports or exercise to see what my true max is? So everybody's max is different. The range, it's sort of the 220, Derek, great call on the 220 minus your age. And my personal opinion on that is those guys that developed that a long time ago and wrote it on the back of a napkin, this, as the story goes, on a plane flight to a conference.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
Are genius. They're very good. No, they really are, because we all use it, and guess what it does? It gets close for 6 out of 10 people. It gets very, very close. Now, for 4 out of 10 people, it will be off. It will be off significantly, so that you can't use it to set your zones and your levels. And from setting zones and levels, we'll get into the question of where to go to see different results in the heart rate. So 6 out of 10 people are going to be close to 220 minus your age. And there are other formulas that have been comprised and been adapted by different organizations like ACSM. And we use one of those as a starting point for our profile. So you get a new person, you plug them in, we know their age. It's 208 minus 0.65 times age. So 208 beats minus 0.65 times age, and it will get you, but it's very, very similar to that age-old 220 minus age. It's just a slightly tweaked formula. So now, once you have your max, once you know, and what I did, you know, and what Don did, you know, when we got it, is I just went out and did a bunch of different kinds of hard workouts. Stadium stairs, 3-mile time trial on the track, lots of kettlebell, high intensity intervals, and I started to see where I go. And what I started to see is when I was training in the high 170s, I was working my tail off. And to increase 1 or 2 beats from, like, let's say 178, 179, 180, 1 or 2 beats, I had to go into that animal style, no holds barred, super focused, and really not knowing what was in front of me or behind me. Then I can maybe add a beat or 2. So my true max heart rate is 183. But you know, that took probably, you know, I don't know, 2-3 months of training with heart rate monitor to be confident to know my max heart rate and be willing to go out and do a lot of hard sessions and really dive in and experiment with it. So from there, you can then start to extrapolate sort of training levels, let's call them. And that's what I was talking about when I talked about those zones that you can see when we break things down in, you know, in Firstbeat. So again, I'll just show these color-coded. Let me find a decent one. Color-coded zones, and then I'll throw it back to you guys for a little fun and discussion here. So, you know, there are my levels, and I told you guys I set the blue at aerobic threshold, where I start to utilize oxygen to do work. right? And that's 65% of heart rate max. The blue is 65% of heart rate max. So that's around 125 beats per minute for me or something like that. And then
that's like an easy run for you, right?
Yeah, that's like that in a run. I'm not going to be in blue. I'm going to be in green and yellow and touch red. You know, now let's dive into where we want to train. For my good friend Tom George, who's a world-class rower, he just did 4:39 for 2,000 meters. He's one of the best guys in the world. They do a lot of UT2 training. That's zone 2. That's my blue zone. So that's a very good assessment by you, Don. That would be a long, easy run or row for him. A lot of time in blue. That'd be 65 to 75% of max heart rate. Green, they call UT. UT is under threshold. So green is UT1 zone. And that for me is 75% of max heart rate all the way to 85, all the way to my threshold. When we train in UT1, we're looking for aerobic power, building the capacity of the endurance aerobic energy system. UT2 is building the base. The base, when you work that long, slow, remember, to get a good workout in UT2, the blue, 65 to 75%, Don, you just said it has to be long duration. The only time I'm going to do UT2 work for short duration is if we're warming up to get ready for one of your workouts, Don. We're going to do a little activation. We're going to do a little movement, a little dynamic, then you'll be in the blue and maybe in the green a little. If you're Landon Donovan and you're warming up for a match, you want to go through all the energies, all the zones in the warm.
What's the correct way of really approaching this? Because I know we try and structure workouts sometimes for the goal. It's like I feel like a lot of times we're just kind of guessing. Well, I'm going to do 30 on, 30 off. I'm going to do a minute on, minute off. I'm going to do, but if you're actually following the heart rate and you're actually able to see how long you might be in that aerobic zone or anaerobic zone, then as you're training, you can really start customizing the workout. Do you ever do that? Do you go in there with the workout at hand and like planned, or do you start the workout that you might have planned and then adjust it according to where your zones are?
Both. In real time, coaches that really have a handle on it will adjust, add, take away on the fly.
Right.
But it's a great question because here we are. I'm talking about time in UT2 and rowers like Tom George, and they have age-old sessions as we all do. Like they have 12K on the erg, and it's at UT2. It takes about an hour and a little over an hour on the erg, and they aren't so concerned with what the training effect for that piece is, Don. What they're concerned about is logging that time in that energy system, because they know from observing results and progressions that if you log a certain amount of time in energy systems over the course of the month or the year, your efficiencies and your capacity grow. But here,
grows.
Yeah, but here, this is a beautiful example. So this workout, and this is hopefully a direct answer to your question. So this is high intensity Bulgarian bag, right? It's 50 seconds on, 10 seconds off, 5 exercises. And then I did 5 rounds of 1 to 2 minute kettlebell. But I went into the workout just like you, Don, trying to get at least a 2.0 on the anaerobic training effect, and I did not get it. And the reason I didn't get it is you can see that I only have a couple big peaks and I don't have very many valleys, which means I wasn't recovering well enough to create. To
be able to really push it. Which most people.
Not just really push it, but to be able to create the anaerobic energy system disturbance that I wanted.
Right, but that's a good, and Derek, I want to get your opinion also. When you said 50-10 and you said high intensity, I know for you it's high intensity because you're out of breath, but most people out there can't really produce that high intensity effect when they're giving themselves 10 seconds rest. It almost becomes more like steady state, doesn't it?
Oh, 100%. The Bulgarian piece is the first 20 minutes, and it's totally linked worked on. That's why I get the big 3.0. I was trying to get the sets and reps, and this is very interesting, and you tell me what you guys think. I did 5 sets of hard kettlebell, 1 to 2 minutes each set, which should be perfect for a big peak, right? 2 minutes is getting a little long, but 1 minute's perfect. And then I rested equal amount of time between. But because my butt was so kicked from the Bulgarian bag, my rest was not very defined in those later sets.
Because you were just kind of gassed, right?
Oh, I was kind of gassed. On the good side, it built a big aerobic training effect, but I didn't get much anaerobic. I got 1.6.
Derek, I'm wondering with your training, because what Derek does a lot, Derek, you do less distance work. I mean, you really are, you're a running mechanics coach, but you focus a lot more on speed, right? I mean, even with your whole speed program. So I'm wondering what, I mean, your workouts, and then this is actually a compliment. I wouldn't necessarily say Derek's training program, the stuff he has people do, isn't necessarily like, it's not going to beat the living crap out of you from an aerobic standpoint. But the next day, you're like, oh my God, my hamstrings, my glutes, like there's areas of your body that you're just not used to feeling because you haven't ever had to produce that type of output, since maybe you were playing college soccer or whatever it might have been, or a specific sport that required you to do that, which is how Derek's training is so much different. But I'm wondering, Derek, if you had your athletes wear this, where something like their trimp would be, or where their, aerobic score would be, I'm sorry, anaerobic score would be at the end of a workout.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, again, if I'm working in like 3-second, 4 or 5, 6-second bursts, using a heart rate hasn't really been useful for that. I know a friend of mine works for Jacksonville, and GPS wasn't useful for like offensive linemen because they didn't travel far enough on the field for it to be useful. So they would use heart rate monitors just to measure workload, to get some load management sort of baseline on them. But, I'm interested in, because when I work with sprinters, we do aerobic work like intervals and all that, but it's almost just to feed the recovery of the alactic work. So there's a use to building that aerobic engine, just not like, a distance runner, or even an 800-meter runner for that matter. So but I still think it's interesting to track it.
Very much so.
Could you, sorry, John, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead, bud.
Could you break down some, like, how would you program some workouts for our viewers? I think they would be interested on how would you program some different types of workouts if it was more for aerobic, anaerobic, body composition, whatever it would be, if you had to deal with different types of athletes with different types of goals. Can you go through maybe 3 or 4 different examples on how you might program, which I know doesn't really have anything to do with the heart rate monitor, but I think just by hearing how you'd go about programming and then use the monitor as a way to be able to define that work that you did, that could be interesting.
Yeah, because even for marathon training, because there's a lot of people who want to, run the New York. Well, I don't know now, but the Boston Marathon. But they're doing virtual races for these, I guess. But what should they be doing to target? If they're going to be going for a 10-mile run, then a 12, and and just build up that capacity to get through it. And then how does that compare to the guy who runs a 2-hour marathon? What kind of rate does he hit? And does it maintain the entire race?
Very cool.
Well, I mean, my thoughts on that, Don, let's just go back to a tangible world-class example of Tom George, my rowing buddy. The race in rowing is approximately 6 minutes long. And from an energy system standpoint, it's the entire time, except maybe the first 10 or 20 seconds, is well over anaerobic threshold. So they're using lactate as a fuel source. They're buffering like crazy. They're oxidative, and they have very, very high capacity. And their threshold is just about as high as any human's threshold can be relative to max heart rate, which means it's up, near 90% of heart rate max. And when I asked Tom, by the way, they do. He was asked by a viewer a month ago when we did our webinar how much time they train on the Great Britain men's rowing team. He trains 14 sessions a week, 7 hours a day. So he was up in the, sometimes it was up in the, and he said, okay, on Sundays we have 1 session. So he said about 45 hours a week. And here's the clincher. What are many of the sessions, if you have to break it down for kind of, really hard competitive intervals or longer or medium or lactate kind of threshold work? And he said, most of our work is UT2, which is, again, just for the visuals for your viewers, is blue, is zone 2, but some people call it, like, zone 1 would be recovery, zone 2 would be that aerobic base. He said a lot, predominantly, is long UT2, or 65 to 75%. Their percentages might be a little different, of heart rate max. So long, slow, efficiency, delivery systems, capillary activity and all this building the aerobic base from which we can work off of. So in your world, Derek, a rower is like a miler. They're like a miler, right? So there's that unbelievable combination of speed and speed endurance. The sprinters are a really interesting example. And I've known many good sprinters I was a javelin thrower, by the way, Derek.
Nice.
Yeah. And I did decathlon in college. So I've done all the events, love track and field. And sprinting is very unique. And it's funny, Don, when you talk about body composition and why sprinters look so fit and ripped and shredded and in incredible, shape. And yet they don't put in the long miles. They don't put in all that work in UT2. I remember Michael Johnson classically said, going into Atlanta, double Olympic gold medals in the 4 and the 2. He said, most of my sessions, most of my workouts are under an hour. Everybody's thinking he's like, we work out for about an hour each day, but very, very high quality and very high intensity and very, as Derek can probably add insight to, just a lot of focus on technique, form, and funny enough, he had very unique form, but that high quality work condensed into a short amount of time.
300-meter sprint in 29 seconds, which is unheard of. I've heard that type of stuff.
God.
Yeah.
Did he ever do the 400?
Yeah. Gold medalist.
Yeah. 43 seconds.
200, 400 gold medalist in the Olympic Games, Don.
Oh, I didn't even know that he did the 400.
Yeah.
I thought he just did
the 2.
No. Both.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
43 something or 40.
But he's not the record holder on that though, right? It was just
not anymore.
Just this last. So that South African broke it, right?
Correct.
Yeah. He was out of his mind. I'll never forget that race.
Yeah.
I'll never forget that race.
What's his name? Vander.
He was in I'll never forget. He was in lane 8.
Was he really? Yeah. Good call.
Yeah, that's just
he's hurt. He's been injured now. I want to see him come back. Oh yeah, he's injured.
I'll never forget afterwards because I think they were talking about how no one's ever won in lane 8. I think I was talking to Derek about this recently on a podcast. They were saying that, and when they interviewed him after, he was just like, I was so scared I couldn't see anyone. It's like I ended up just running the race of my life, and
I had to look it up so we give people the info. Wade Van Niekerk.
Yes, Wade. That was
43:03.
And he had his trainer was like an older woman, wasn't it? Wasn't she like?
I think it might be his mom or something.
Yeah, it's crazy. I'll never forget that race. That was amazing. I
mean, let's just for some of your viewers, this is fun stuff about your question earlier, Don. And I digress a little bit, but just trying to get some cool heart rate stuff in there. When do we burn? For all those people out there, when are we burning the highest percentage of fat? This is one of the first things we all learn. The fat burning myth. When do we burn the highest percentage of fat? When we're sleeping. So if somebody wants to burn the highest percentage of fat, even though the pie that they're going to be burning is very tiny, they can just rest all day. But the pie is so tiny that they really won't accomplish much.
Right.
So as we work higher in these intensities, as we work higher into our levels, when I'm anaerobic in that yellow represented here with the yellow color and then the red for a little bit there, I'm not burning a high percentage of fat.
Putting more sugar, right? What do you burn?
Yeah, yeah, carbs and sugar, but my pie is much bigger. So I'm burning when I'm over anaerobic threshold, I'm burning about 20 calories per minute for my body size, my body type. But maybe the percentage has gone, instead of from 60 or 70% fat, which is what you'd be burning in UT2, now maybe I'm only burning 35% fat. But guess what? At double the calories per minute, I don't give a shit. I'll take 35% of 20 over 60% of 8 any day of the week. Right, Derek?
It's all math.
It's all math. Now, that doesn't mean UT2 work isn't good for burning, because if you're Tom George and you're putting in 90-minute sessions, 2-hour sessions of good, I mean, he had this unbelievable example. He was on a watt bike and he did 90 minutes and the whole workout was supposed to be UT2. So again, for the viewers, that's blue. That's 65 to 70% of heart rate max. That's not hard. Tom was pushing over 300 watts for most of the workout. So remember, as you get strong, as you get really strong.
He did that for 90 minutes? Yeah,
it's his average, Don, his average was 337 watts for the 90-minute workout. And now he got a little higher toward the end. It wasn't all blue, but
I did a Vo2 test yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
I went in for one, and I went in on the Concept 2 bike, which I thought, I mean, I'm not a cyclist.
Yeah.
So my legs burnt out
Wow.
big time. I'm 17 minutes in and I'm running at about 310 on the wattage.
That's pretty good, dude.
But my
Pretty strong.
legs were done.
I would be the same. I mean, the kind of work that he can do and stay efficient is phenomenal. It's absolutely phenomenal.
But my next question was, my heart rate only got to 155, which
Yeah.
for me, I can go run nonstop at 150, 155. That's
Yeah.
like a hard, like, I'm running 5 miles hard type of thing.
Yeah.
And I feel like, and I spoke to the gentleman at the DEXA place that ran me through this. He was a great guy. And he said, he's like, listen, the bike got you. It wasn't your heart rate.
Well, not only that, Don, but listen, the bike, that's just a testament to your fitness and also a little bit about how you do work and how you respond to stimuli. It doesn't surprise me a bit after looking at your sessions with you. The bike, remember, is fixed. And what are we doing on the bike? We're bracing we're supporting with our upper body, and we're working our legs. So you're going to get a pretty good response. And if you're a really, really good cyclist and really know how to ride, it can be an accurate VO2 max test. But I would say 50% of the people that do VO2 max on a bike do exactly what you did. The legs start burning out. And also your heart rate was only 155. So the VO2 max score you got is going to be a little bit lower than what you could achieve running or skating or whatever.
Yeah, no, I definitely. I mean, he said they're going to bring in a motorless treadmill, and I think that would probably be more my gear to be able to. I'm
guessing your VO2 max was still just fine. So I don't.
No,
you know what I mean?
It read excellent, but it was that
Exactly.
clip. Could I have gotten a superior? And I think the answer was I think the answer was yes. I probably could have scored. Whatever the hell that means, it doesn't matter. I mean, at that point, it's like whatever. Yeah. But the legs were a factor, and I was like, shit.
By the way, 310 watts in a step test like that is no joke. So. I mean, that's great stuff. And it's just a testament. My point here is that as we get stronger and as we get fitter, training, in UT2 or this blue zone can be a very effective way at developing lots of good habits and lots of good systems in our body. And it's just a lot of people don't want to put in that quality time in those lower zones.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's, Derek, let me ask this, and then I want you to jump in because I know you have one. There is a misconception out there on where the best fat burning zones are, right? I mean, everyone's always talking about hit, but you're saying right now that the zones that are lower are probably a little bit better to optimize fat burning. Is that what you're saying? Or are you
only if you have a long duration? The beauty of hit, Don, is that you can accomplish a pretty good
lot in a little time.
In a little time, yeah. Because remember, the concept for these people to understand is that high intensity, like when I do the Bulgarian bad, basically at 20 minutes of that kind of workout, okay, maybe 25, maybe 30, you're pretty toast. And that's a beautiful thing because we can hit all our muscles, we can hit our cardiovascular system, we can hit our endurance and our anaerobic and get some peaks. And
you're killing a lot of birds with one stone is what you're saying.
But I'm burning 20 calories in a minute. And maybe, and those people are right, it's only 30% fat maybe, right? Or 35 or 33 or 30. But again, what's 35% of 20, right? That's 7 calories of fat. Now, if I stayed in my UT2 and burned 8 calories a minute, but I had 60% or 70% fat, that's going to be like 6 calories of fat, 5 or 6 calories. So do I want 7 calories of fat or do I want 5 or 6? It depends on the duration.
Right, I was about to say.
It depends on the duration.
It's very difficult to figure these things out because sometimes, like I know when I visit Don in New York, I know there's these group fitness places that hammer people for 45 minutes and maybe high intensity, but for the rest of the day, they're sitting in an office, they're not doing much, and they think they're getting a lot just out of this 45-minute high intensity thing, but they're not hitting those other zones that might be important throughout the day, would you say?
Oh, gosh. I think, listen, you can get nuanced with this stuff, and back to the Johnny G quote, and to the question that we could go on for ages on, and maybe we have a whole series on this stuff, Don, is if I'm watching a room full of heart rates dance, like 145, 156, 183, and Derek, your point, and I've seen it so many times in spin classes, I see some young people or some deconditioned people, but they might be thin and have good energy, and their heart rates are very high. but I noticed that there's no load on the bike. So what I would always tell those people is, if we were outdoors, you would be way back there and you would be forced to add load and really train. Because right now you're not training, you're actually just fluttering along like a hummingbird. And what we want to do is change that response to work. They know the heart is a muscle, and they know they have one or two gears in there. One of them is like life and walking around it, and the other one is like pretending they're training, and they go straight to, high heart rates. And that's the worst response in the world. We want to go through those levels. And Don, that's why it's a testament to all the good work you put in for all those years, because you have to work through all your levels to get to a high intensity. And that's good. You do a little bit of work, you go up here. You do a little more, you go here. Oh, you do a little less work. Oh, guess what? You go down there.
Right.
I always say that the heart rate tracing, and again, that's these peaks and valleys, that tracing should make sense. You know what I mean? Like after my first yellow peak there, if I told you that I took 3 minutes rest and it looked like that wouldn't make sense.
No, it wouldn't. You'd be like, would there be a problem there? You'd almost be like, wow, he's not recovering, correct?
Well, the problem would be like, exactly. And that would be the chance for you to tell your client, hey, come on, let's breathe. Let's walk over here. Let's enjoy to take them out of that system of sympathetic dominance, fight or flight. You always want to be in balance with and this is so important to maybe the most important thing we can discuss in this whole scope of heart rates and levels is sympathetic versus parasympathetic. In today's age, everybody is so used to being and seeking stimulus, and all these apps competing for our attention. It drives our sympathetic nervous system, our fight or flight, to the point where we no longer are in balance or activating our parasympathetic. The parasympathetic nervous system is rest and digest, and it allows the heart rate to come down, and it's stimulated by good breath work, right? The biggest thing happening now in the training environment is breath work. From Wim Hof to Brian Mirabella to Oxygen Advantage, Peter McCown. Like, how do you breathe? How are we utilizing oxygen, and how are we building resistance to carbon dioxide so that we can better use the stored oxygen in our cells and our hemoglobin?
Do you do monitoring as part of those breathing sort of exercises and all that?
Derek, it's so cool, and I'm starting to incorporate into breath work. And this is a chart of our resting 3 minute. And Don, you and I talked about this. I hope you've gotten into it, or you will. And Derek, what we get from this 3 minute resting evaluation is a recovery score. You see my recovery score there, nice. And the metrics beside it. So you can see here that I'm at 64% recovered based on each peak and valley there. It represents a breath, a respiration, an inhalation. The heart rate goes up.
I've never seen that. Is that
that's cool?
Inhalation, the heart rate goes down.
But wait,
by the way,
is that after the workout? I've never used that.
It's a separate session. You have to analyze it for QRT. Don, you just go here. You can do it with the belt. You just save a 3 minute session of resting data, and then you go here and you click, instead of exercise, you click QRT, and then it saves it and analyzes it for QRT.
And do you just pretty much lay down on the floor as if you were doing your readiness test in the beginning?
Exactly. It is the readiness.
So it's basically a readiness test to be done after the workout.
Before the workout. Before.
Oh, before the workout. That I have done. Oh,
yes.
Okay. That's awesome.
That's cool. I think that's something more valuable, at least for some of the stuff I do, to get people to bring themselves down, bring their tone down. And that'd be really cool to use. Yeah.
Derek, you'd love that. Exactly. The vagal tone. So when I'm getting, we call it quick recovery. So when I'm doing this, and this is just to the example of parasympathetic and breath and how that enhances vagal tone and basically enhances your athlete's ability to handle stress and to respond, to be resilient. What we're looking at here is the synchronicity between the breathing rate and the heart rate. And when there's that nice flow that you can see, because when you take an inhalation, the heart rate goes up and the HRV decreases. When you exhale, the heart rate comes down and the HRV increases. And this is the beautiful, alignment of breath, and why breath stimulates heart rate variability and stimulates our ability to recover. So a lot there. We give the RMSSD values here, shown here. We give the lowest heart rate. And then we summarize the RMSSD and lowest heart rate in a quick recovery scaled score, 0 to 100%.
I got a quick question here, John. I know for a lot of people listening out there, they want to monitor their heart rate and do all these things. Now, I have a Garmin that does wrist-based, but I also bought the chest strap to go with it as well. What is the difference for people out there between the wrist-based versus the chest strap-based heart rate measuring?
Yeah, I would never rely on understanding a workout from a wrist-based solution. And the primary reason is just that what's happening here at the periphery is very different than what's happening here at the system in several ways. One way is, like, let's say we're riding a bike or something like Don was yesterday, Vo2 Max. You know, what's happening in the wrist or hand is going to be vastly different from the systemic response to intensity, to load. So it can be as much as 20 to 30 beats. And also there's a big lag, because even if we start working and it's a steady build, kind of like that bike session yesterday, Don, eventually the pulse rate will start to, you know, jive with what's going on in the system, but it might take 20 or 30 seconds. So if you're trying to look, it's very frustrating to me. One of the most frustrating things, you guys tell me what you think about data. Actually, Don, I know from the way you are about workouts and information, and talking to you 6 months ago, I think it's the same for you. If I'm out doing a workout, Derek, and we're doing stuff, and I see that, like, the feedback I'm getting or the biofeedback of the information is wrong, it's very frustrating. It makes me not want to look at it, not want to use it, and not want to, you know, either I get so...
It's discouraging.
It's discouraging, and it's also more than that. Yeah, you kind of, it messes with your whole workout and your whole approach to, you know, so that has to be part of this whole split between using a risk-based solution or a solution that's not validated or not accurate.
I feel like the wrist, they will be there one day. It will get there one day. I just still feel like I'm yet to see something that, I mean, I never have a problem with the chest strap. It's 10 out of 10 times. I've never once looked at Firstbeat as I'm running with it and said to myself, all right, well, that's not right. Yet I've with every wearable wristwatch I've done.
Right, me too.
Yeah, at some point, I mean, great companies like, you know, Mio, like companies that I've worn it and I'm looking down and I'm saying, wow, this is spot on. I'm double measuring somehow. And then out of nowhere, my heart rate drops 40 beats. And I'm like, it shouldn't be dropping. Like, what's going on there?
Yeah.
That can throw off your entire psyche. First off, that was an hour already, which I don't know where the hell our time went. Awesome. John, I can't thank you enough. Listen, I mean, I would love to do this if Derek's cool with it, maybe in like a 2-part series, because I think today was more about giving people an education on the Firstbeat system, and heart rate. But what I'd love to do, potentially come back in and maybe kind of create some case studies and walk through how you would potentially design training in reference to maybe 4 different types of athletes with 4 different types of goals. Something like that would be fun, because I think that would get people really excited, Derek, over, oh, well, I'm training for that. That's interesting. Let me try that. And Derek and I, our whole focus with this podcast is to just educate people and give them we're trying to be a solution.
Yeah, since I'm older than Don, I suggest we put Don on a treadmill real time, John, and we monitor his heart rate with the iPad.
I'll do whatever. You know me. I'll never. But John loves that stuff, and I love that stuff.
I love
That's
that stuff. Don, we can definitely start with, you know, one of your recent sessions and kind of break it down and how we would tweak it or deliver it to your people. But the one I'll end with this, and we can build on it for the, you know, the analysis of some of these sessions we're talking about. Back to the example of a field of heart rates and how to make sense of it, because that's ultimately what people do. Is we used to have this question at Sunto, Derek, years ago. Is the information we're delivering interesting? And most people, I mean, 9 out of 10 people that are trying to get fit, people that are trying to change body comp or get stronger would say, yeah, it's interesting. The follow-up question would be, is it compelling enough that you'll continue to use it to improve? And most people would say no. Now, because the heart rate is sort of abstract as a standalone number, that's why the training effect score becomes so valuable. Okay, and that's what we'll try to hit on is, when do you shoot for a 2.0? When is a 3.0 the goal? And how do you tweak the programming to arrive at that 3.0 disturbance? When is a 4.0 the goal?
Is there a chart for someone who's not, say, advanced, who wants to come in and start using the system, but would look at a very simple chart and say to themselves, these are the ranges I want to try and be in if I'm training for X? Is there a chart for someone who's not, say, advanced, who wants to come in and start using the system, but would look at a very simple chart and say to themselves, these are the ranges I want to try and be in if I'm training for X? Like that sounds like it would be a great idea.
It's a great idea. And I think people have delivered that over the years, Don, pretty effectively. Like you'll see those, here's a block, 3-minute block, and you're in the yellow, and then recover to your, gray, and then up. There are those. Firstbeat doesn't deliver programming. And we've wrestled with this a lot. And basically, you know why? We give you the science and the accurate monitoring, and you guys have to build the programs.
No. I get it. And it's great for coaches like us because I will adjust the program according to what I'm seeing on that given day. Exactly. And that's something I can do. I'm just speaking more for general pop who actually doesn't have the ability to do that. That's not their job. I was just curious in reference to that.
No, and we used to have a coaching tool in there that would allow you to kind of set the intensity and duration. It would tell you what the resulting epoch would be or training effect. It was called, and I called it, and I loved it for gyms and for upper body cranking classes and spin classes. It was called target training effect. And you would build the pieces of work, and it would result in a 3.5 or a 3.2 or 4.0. But essentially that's what we're trying to do here is schematically develop how much intensity, how much duration, how many sets and reps, duration of each effort to get to that all-important 3.0, which is an improving training effect. You've done enough to improve your ability to resist fatigue and build peak capacity. So that's the home run piece. How do we get 3.0s? And over time, as you get fitter, you do more work before you get to that 3.0. So you have to add elements to deliver that same disturbance to get the result of getting fitter.
Are there resources that are on either your site or the Firstbeat site that people can tap into and just read up on a lot of this stuff?
100%. We have a lot on anaerobic training effect, aerobic training effect, epoch, trim. So if you just go to firstbeat.com and click on science, that's one of the biggest things our company sort of prides itself on, Derek, is, and you know this from being an early Suunto user, the quality about the Finnish scientists, like everybody at Firstbeat and many, many people at Suunto are endurance athletes and sports scientists. So what they're really trying to do is combine their passion with their knowledge and their education to deliver usable and accurate, lab accurate systems. If you just go to firstbeat.com and science, you can get really gnarly going to the white papers, or you can just touch on sort of the user guides and the training effect, the definitions of how we deliver HRV metrics, how we deliver training effect metrics. But yeah, so much more to discuss. That's such a great question, Don. I want to even try to tap on it more in the next one. Like what does that first time or first week or first month user who's training with heart rate, how do they get more than just that interesting level? How do they actually learn and get better from training with heart rate? Right. That's really the secret. We can touch on that later.
Well, I think the data is incredible. And John, can you tell everyone where can they find you from a social media standpoint? I know you just gave the website to look up more about Firstbeat, but give us some more information.
Yeah, for sure. I do a lot of my data analysis and work with teams. I'll put it on my Instagram. So it's JLALS, JLALS, which are just my initials, 8,000 for Instagram, JLALS 8,000. So there we'll do a lot of kind of breaking down different sessions. How do you get to certain target training effects? And then some fun stuff behind the scenes with teams and stuff like that.
JLALS? What?
Yep. JLALS 8000.
I thought I was following you already. I am? No, I'm not. Now I am.
I think you are, yeah.
JLALS 8000. Yeah, no, I got it. 8,000. I got it. Pivot Sports, that's it. You got a new follower. This is incredible stuff. Big D.
Love it. Yeah.
Questions as always, brother. Appreciate everything.
Yeah, if it wasn't smoky, I'd go out and run right now, John. And
I know you get inspired. Built an epoch. Well, the funny thing is, Derek, that's one of the equalizing factors about heart rate and about epoch is you can build a disturbance anywhere. Don, you know that, like, you can do it anywhere. I always tell people, if I had a telephone book and a jail cell, I can get a 3.0. It's just a question of how bad you want it and what kind of, movements you're going to be creative with to start to, basically to inspire more oxygen and build that disturbance. So super fun to try to find different ways of doing that. Thanks, guys.
Well, thank you, John. Really appreciate your time. Derek and I would love to have you on again and maybe do a couple of case studies. Derek, I think that'd be fun. What do you think?
Yeah, I just think it's very timely that your company's Pivot Sports. Everybody's got a pivot now. So
yeah, definitely.
I love it.
Thanks, buddy.
Awesome. Derek, John, thank you guys.
You're
the best. Take care.
You too, buddy.
Thanks, Dave.
Take care.